There may be when we've got the infants and the toddlers, that might be a time when you, like you said, are reaching out to make some new friendships. It doesn't mean you're disloyal. It
Yeah.
doesn't mean that you won't circle back in another season when they have a little more flexibility in time. Their focus is on their babies right now. And we know, again, getting back to what we talked about in the last question, we know down deep that that's exactly what mamas should be doing. Now, we also said they should be getting some independent time with their friends and with their husband, most importantly, to make sure that marriage stays strong. However, it's also important that they have a huge amount of their time and focus on their children.
Yes.
We know that intellectually it can still hurt. It can still feel like our friends have abandoned us. It can still feel like that we don't matter as much in their world. We don't mean as much to them. So we have to kind of look at that, like you said earlier with the other question, we have to look at that honestly, recognize how that feels. Welcome to Love and Life. I'm Dr. Karin Anderson-Abril here with my co-host,
Pastor Elliott Anderson.
And Love and Life is your place to hear conversations grounded in psych research, psychotherapy,
and biblical truth
to help us thrive in love and life. It is Christmas time. The holidays
in the
are
city.
Ring-a-ling, ring-a-ling.
Hear them ring.
Hear them ring.
It's Christmas time. I don't know the words,
soon it will be. All right, anyway.
I've started my brushes work and I'm done singing already.
Yeah.
going to the drum mode.
He is the drummer and I'm the vocalist. Anyway, it's Christmas time, relationships, family, all the things. So I reached out to Instagram to our community there, Elliott, and asked for a couple questions.
Okay.
And we got some.
Awesome.
So let's just hit it with these questions here. And I'm pulling one up right now.
Thanks for your Christmas hair.
Yeah. Green sweater.
Bandana or something? Or
it's mostly a headband, but
headband.
Yeah. Bandana vibes. Okay, question. Friends love to talk about upcoming vacations, romantic winter getaways, and or upcoming trips with other couples in the new year, etc. I'm happy they have stuff to look forward to and also kind of bummed I wasn't invited, or also that I don't have a partner to travel with. Feeling super awkward when I'm asked in front of a group what I'm looking forward to in 2025 and I don't have a trip planned. How do I navigate this without them taking pity on me?
Yeah, good question and totally understandable.
Hey there, parents. We have an early Christmas gift for you. After thousands of customer requests, the wellness company has just launched its Kids Medical Emergency Kit. So now parents can have 6 critical medications at your fingertips to treat over 20 illnesses for issues like strep throat, ear infections, lice, and respiratory illnesses. You can avoid those urgent care and hospital visits. The Kids Emergency Kit has been hand-selected by the Wellness Company's medical board and includes chewable amoxicillin, dissolvable ivermectin, an optional EpiPen, and more. It also includes a detailed guidebook so you'll know exactly what kind of dosage to give your child to get your kid back on his or her feet in no time. Ordering the kit is simple. You just fill out an intake form and then you'll get a verification phone call for consent. The kit then arrives directly to your home. Don't wait until you're in the middle of a crisis and avoid those late night urgent care runs and hospital stays because we know those aren't actually the safest places to be when you're sick. Order your Kids Emergency Kit today. And if 1 or 2 of the scripts runs out, there's a replenishment option to restock only what you need. Go to twc.health/lovelife and grab your kids' emergency kit right now. Use code LOVELIFE, LOVELIFE, all one word, at checkout to save 15% off. These kits are only available in the U.S.
What always has worked for me as a very, very competitive person, when I hear someone comment like that, my first thought is to compete with it, not necessarily to feel sad or comparison. But I recognize both sides. The competition and the comparison side are often fairly similar. And so what helps me always is to acknowledge and affirm. Okay? It kind of goes into that building intimacy, the 3 A's again, to acknowledge and affirm and be happy for the person for whatever they're doing and bless it and say that'd be awesome. Karin, we laugh because I hate to travel. You love to travel. And so, if you tell me about a cool trip you and Dan are going, I truly can celebrate it for you because I know how much you love it. And I can often say things like, I'm glad it's not me. Right? I'm glad I'm not traveling. And so it helps just to allow your joy and love for the person to lead you first. And to just say, man, that's awesome. I'm excited for you. I hope it's a great time and look forward to seeing pictures. And you got to be genuine about it. So if you really don't like the person that much, that's going to be
I think
hard to do. But
I think it's the single issue too. It's like,
I haven't got there yet. I didn't get to that point
yet.
Okay,
because I feel like you're just like.
Well, I'm positive.
You
I'm
don't
going positive first, baby.
Anyway, that's my point. You don't care. This wouldn't bother you. I shouldn't even asked you because you don't like to travel. So
yes, but if someone said something like, I just finished my book and I'm not done with mine yet, right? Then I might be, okay, I'm going to get another book done before you get your next book done, right? And that's why I'm talking about the competitive energy piece. But I think if we don't immediately lead with the affirmation, it's just basic listening principles. If we don't lead with the affirmation to hear them and affirm them and even bless them if we can, like, that sounds awesome, I know you're going to have a great time. That, first of all, will change our whole perspective. Because if we start to go internal right away and right, have that whole must be nice commentary, in the back of your head, or just feeling, bitter or resentful, that's going to stay with us. It's going to stick. So if we can affirm and bless upfront first, that makes a big, big difference.
So how do you do that though? I mean, if it's a pain point, so you have to just rise above the very human reaction, which is to be jealous and to
acknowledge that in your soul, but not necessarily acknowledge it out loud. That's
no. Right. Okay. Yeah. So I want brass tacks again. Sometimes I feel like you get theoretical, and I
gave you examples just a minute ago. I said to affirm and to bless and say, that's great. Have a great time. Those were fairly.
But you also said that needs to be genuine. And I'm saying, that's not necessarily the first human impulse. So how do we rise above that is what I'm asking.
Okay. And some of that is simply the matter of the will and the psychological dynamic of who controls the brain, us or the brain, right? And that's a funny question to ask people. But I ask people that all the time in trauma recovery. Who's leading this recovery, you or your brain? Because your brain's going to go back to the trauma response. The brain's going to go automatically to the jealousy. The brain's going to go back to the instinctual. Well, that stinks. That's not fair. I don't have a boyfriend or a husband to take me somewhere I totally get that, right? For 10 years, Angie and I celebrated everyone having babies around us and not us. So I get it too. You've known that as a single woman. You've known that for children as well. We know that pain. It's reality. Mm-hmm. So I'm not saying, it's kind of like our Get Happy chapter in the Simon Says book, which is a great Christmas present for anybody needing a little self-help, a little neurology, a little cognitive behavioral techniques with self and others to literally make yourself happy for that person by just going there instinctually. Mm-hmm. Don't deny you're jealous. Don't deny you're sad. Don't deny you're
intentionally.
Frustrated.
Your instinct is to be jealous. You're saying go there intentionally.
Yes, thank you. That's a better word. Yeah. It can become instinctual though if you do it enough.
If you fake it till you make it, and that's CBT too. Oftentimes we have to will ourselves to be in a state.
I like that better than fake it. You and I are super extroverted, so we can do it without faking. But I understand some people are not very communicative verbally, not very extroverted, and they really will have to fake it a little bit. You'll have to fake being happy for the person a little bit. Mm-hmm. But it does make a difference. The neurology will switch, right? You will get to that point.
You will, yeah.
We don't want to deny the pain. You don't want to deny and act like it doesn't hurt. In fact, you might have to say something positive and happy and then go to the bathroom and cry.
Right.
And just kind of regroup. Mm-hmm. And then when they ask you those questions like, what are you doing? Or do you got any traveling plan? If you do, great. If you don't, just be honest again. The honesty reflection is the best. Like, I'm not heading anywhere in this Christmas break and I'm a little bit sad about it. Right? You don't have to lay out your whole heart and soul or you know what? I'm just going to do a stay at home thing. I'm going to be home and I hope to connect and maybe do something with my friends next summer if I get a chance. But at the moment, I don't have any plans. And if we try to manipulate and shape it and kind of give a quasi truth or quasi honesty there, it ends up sabotaging us more than the other person. Depending on the relationship with the other person, they may or may not even care. Well, give me feedback. Come on, I see it in your eyes.
Yeah. Well, here's where I'm going with this. I have over the years, and as you pointed out, there's been many years where I was single and people are getting engaged and getting married. And I was doing exactly what I'm asking, what I think we're asking our listener to do, which is, yes, acknowledge the hurt. I personally probably wasn't going to share that with that person because I didn't want them to think I was raining on their parade. And I wanted to make it about them. Everything's not about us. However, we are having legitimate responses. And I found, sadly, and this is where you're probably going to do a little therapy on me, my default mode became not to share, like you're saying, because I didn't, like our listeners saying, I didn't want their pity.
Yeah.
And I didn't find that people often, and I mean, again, it's a cocktail party. It's a Christmas party. Like, I don't expect people to be in full on therapeutic mode, but I found that sometimes their responses could minimize my hurt, and I wanted to protect myself. So I wouldn't say maybe, oh, I'm not going on a trip or something, because I didn't want them to be like, oh, well, I'm sure something will turn up, or I'm sure you'll meet somebody in 2025, I didn't want to hear that felt like a pat answer. It felt, or it could get into, like, with kids stuff, I don't tend to share when people are talking about their kids a lot, which is what people do at this, women do especially. It's very much focused. I don't tend to share if I'm feeling sadness about not being a mother, because then they'll go into, oh, well, you're lucky because these kids are driving me crazy. And so it's just, I don't know that most people, and man, this is like maybe another podcast episode, but Elliott, I don't think most people really have the tools to be able to, because I mean, when you share something that vulnerable, then we've got all this like Brene Brown research, like you got to be vulnerable. I'm like, the heck I do. I do not want to. I think
there's preparation and preconditions here, right? So I think that we've talked about this several years ago when we talked about family dynamics.
Yeah.
So knowing what kind of atmosphere you're in, because a Christmas party with your best friends and loved ones, your family, is way different than a cocktail party with the work crew.
Right.
Right. So we got to know preparation.
The level of connection with the people that you're.
And the event. What is the event? What's the environment? If we're all sitting around mom's fireplace, that's way different than downtown at an opera or something, right? So we got to know the environment, the condition. And I think it's the preparation, or what I tell with couples, the pre-communication. So be thinking to yourself, hey, this could be a scenario where I'm going to get some of these weird questions that kind of make me mad or sad. How do I feel like doing those right now? What kind of mood am I in? What kind of spirit am I in? And so I'm not asking for massive disclosure, but the best defense is almost always truth. And just trying to come up even with your own self, just a small, simple truth. I'm a little bit sad this Christmas break, but I'm going to stay at home. And if someone says, oh man, I'm sorry to hear that, and you go, thanks, and then move on. If someone says, well, what are you sad about? Right? Because that could happen. You go, you know what? That's another time, another place. Let's enjoy the rest of the afternoon. Right? So you just got to have the certain elements to disclose pining a little bit, maybe. You don't have to. Our extroverted folks like you and me who kind of light up in crowds, we can probably be a little bit more strategic in our responses. And those who are quiet and laid back and passive, they probably got to be a little more prepared as far as planning.
No, I think that's really wise. And we talked about it in terms of family stuff, but I think it absolutely generalizes to any kind of situation. And recognize maybe everyone's in some place of pain.
Absolutely.
Your pain point, you look at what do they say? The grass is always greener on the other side. So you see someone else's situation, you're like, oh, they have the boyfriend that I'm hoping to have, or they have the husband that I'm hoping to have, or they have the kids I'm hoping to have. They have the life that I want to have, but there's something going on with them that's hurtful for them. So maybe try to think about, where can you be sensitive to whatever they're going through?
Yeah.
And at the same time, and I also like just preparing yourself for a quick pivot should that follow-up question come that you are not prepared to. Is certainly in that context.
It doesn't feel safe. It doesn't feel right.
Right.
Yeah. And I think another piece, Karin, is also the recognizing if you have a very happy, positive, achievement-oriented, celebratory-oriented family system or work environment where like it's kind of like everybody's got to one-up each other for like cool things. To not go there, I mean, you can go there dreading it because that can be honest. You just don't want to do it, but maybe you feel you need to get there. But to have something ready within the systemic of that environment so you're not left out, feeling ostracized, marginalized. So I'm not saying fake it. I'm not saying lie and make something up. But if you know it's going to be all about the new promotion, the new wedding, the new baby, and you're like, I got nothing new. What am I sharing? Because everyone shares that way. Then think through those things or prepare. What is something I can talk about I want to do new next year? I'm thinking about, you don't have to pretend it's automatic, but I'm thinking about starting yoga. I'm thinking about leading a new small group at church, right? So you can join that dynamic without feeling like you're lost, you're outside of it. Because sometimes we self-defeat so much before we arrive that we get ourselves in a pre-traumatic response and a pre-sensory overload. And sometimes that's going to happen to us. Everybody, me too, Karin too. We're super social, extroverted people, but it happens to us too. Right. So I don't want people to think, oh, this is easy. I understand I'm saying some of this stuff's hard, but we can prepare, plan, and even, I like that, prepare, plan, and pivot, Karin. Maybe it's our new 3 Ps of social interaction when you're talking about delicate matters. Prepare, plan, and pivot. Have some pivots ready. And sometimes the pivots for certain people, like I'm thinking of our lovely mama. Sometimes, in fact, Mom and I had this conversation a while back about sometimes at our small group events, our prayer meetings, our stuff. It's a small little church, right? Sometimes she'll bring up kind of a big issue in front of everybody. And then I can feel the room just watch. It's the senior pastor and his mom. Mom's the matriarch of our church, right? She's like the spiritual mother of the church. And so I've talked to Mom because she's sometimes like, honey, you didn't seem quite as comfortable when I brought that up. I said, Mom, that's you and me outside conversation.
She's not talking about me, is she?
No. Good. Talking about maybe the church bylaws or talking about, but she asked it in a way of mother-son, but it's in the dynamic of pastor and matriarch. And so I've just told Mom, sometimes I pivot on you on those. And I know you were like, what happened? Why are we doing that? And then I explained to her why. People are watching. Sometimes she gets information no one else gets. Obviously, she's my mom. So she knows directions we're going or things I'm moving to do in the church way before everybody else does. Her and Angie, of course. And so that's that same kind of dynamic. My mom, of course, is a good communicator. We have a really good relationship. But sometimes in those circles at church, I pivot her. Even though she kind of knows, why is Elliott pivoting me? It's because the context of the group, my position, her role. Mm-hmm. And I think we just got to prepare, plan, and pivot.
Yeah. And I'll put another P in there. So,
oh, nice.
Yeah.
Alliterations. That's what I do.
But this is not, those are the 3 Ps for what to do. Okay. But there's one other underlying theme that as we're talking, and I hadn't really thought about this per se, another P per se. But one thing I've noticed, Elliott, I will often pivot even before even a question maybe was totally fine, but I don't want to deal with it. Sure. I don't want to be particularly vulnerable in a lot of contexts. I'll be full disclosure. Seems very strange with someone who has a podcast and talks. But I don't, when it gets to certain topics, I don't want to. And it's partly a pride thing. Sure. I don't want people to know that I'm hurting.
Yeah, and that's okay. And that's reality, right?
But pride is bad. It's isn't that?
Yes, but this is a different kind of pride.
Oh.
Right? This isn't the pride to puff yourself up or make yourself look better. This is a pride saying that vulnerability hits me a little bit. And as an emotional woman, there's times you probably are okay crying and others you probably don't want to. So in the middle of a big event where everybody's happy and social, right? We don't want to have crying in the corner, right? Angie and I left many church services early because people kept asking us inappropriate questions about fertility. Mm-hmm. Right? It's a children's dedication Sunday and we're there doing our best to celebrate with everybody else, even though we're almost a decade without. And then someone come up and say, Angie, would you like to be up there someday? Are you kidding me? What kind of dumb question is that? Of course she wants to be up there some, right? And those things happen. Mm-hmm. And so, right, at that moment, the pivot was leave, right? And that was just, there was no great way to, I didn't want to hurt someone's feelings. It was usually sweet old ladies who weren't meaning to be, demeaning and hurtful. They genuinely cared. They were just trying to, they recognized it. It was too much for them. So the pride piece, Karin, probably gets in the way sometimes or probably deflects. But you and I both teach disclosure elements in our classes and things. There's times to disclose and time not to. Mm-hmm. And huge social events are not great deep disclosure events.
And along these lines, I have found, and it may be a bit manipulative. I'm being very full disclosure right now. So,
all right, bring it on. Let's go.
It may be manipulative, but I will just pivot with a question back to them, whatever they want to talk about, and then just let them go. Because most people, even those we love so much, they are really happier if they're talking about themselves anyway.
Absolutely. And there's where your listening skills as a clinician, you can just switch. And that's standard. I mean, I'm sure Dan would tell us about this, and Jacob now, he's in sales too, right? My son, I think they'd tell us this too. Great listening is just as much as part of the sell and the relational connection as talking.
Oh, way more.
Dan so it's
way more.
I watch Dad pivot people all the time because he didn't love to share about himself, but he would really lock on to what they're doing. Mm-hmm. And half the time I would sit there and listen to him go, he does not care.
I think he did care. I challenge you on that.
Well, if they were passionate and they were successful.
He was genuinely curious. Why would
Curious is different than caring. Curious is different than caring.
I don't know. Why do we have to go down this road right now? You just told people to buy Dad's book, the book about Dad, and then you're like, well, he didn't really care that much. I don't think
I say in the book that
I disagree.
If he didn't get engaged and activated in the conversation, sometimes he'd tune out just because of his ADHD and his super fast brain. I'm not saying
I think Dad was genuinely curious and cared about a lot of people. So I'm
not saying he didn't care. I'm saying he was more curious than caring.
Whatever.
When I told him I was going to be a pastor, he said, how are you going to care about all those people? Why will you care about them all the time, right? I'm not saying he was a bad man or anything. I'm just saying that curiosity factor. That is a great way. The pivot, you said, is to ask questions about others. So for our listener who sent the question, know what people's talking points are, know what they care about, know what they're engaged in. And if you need to, or you sense it, or like you've done strategically, just go right there right away. And it'll often deflect and give you that space you need.
And that preparation is key, not just emotionally preparing yourself for the kind of questions that are probably going to come at you, but also that planning, like you're saying, because have some talking points ready that are in domains that you're comfortable talking about.
Yes.
And I'm actually telling myself this right now because I think I told Dan recently, I was like, I'm getting so to the point where when people do ask me a question, I don't think I'm very good at responding, partly because I'm the youngest child. No one listened to me anyway. So I'm assuming I have to get it out so quickly or else they're going to lose interest.
Move on.
No, it's so true. He's like, Karin, I do think that's a little true. He's like, you always are asking other people questions, which is wonderful. But then they have a normal, like a benign topic. It's not even something that's sensitive. And I'm like, wait. Anyway.
You almost made me spit my water out.
Sorry. Well, because it's your fault. Because being the youngest child. So I can just blame you and Warren.
I take a part of the blame. I don't know if I take the full blame, but
I think you can go ahead and take it. All right. I hope that was helpful. Just recapping. We're going to go to our P's. We're going to prepare emotionally. We're going to plan for how to coax the conversation into content that we are comfortable sharing. Try to find that common ground. There's still some common ground with these people, even if they have that married, kids, travel life, and you are single and not sure what's happening in 2025. Find that common ground, hobbies, anything that you guys have shared over the years, you and your friends or anyone else that you can, if you're interacting with someone at a cocktail party or whatever, and pivot.
Yeah. And then I think we're going to say, recognize your pride and be okay. Give yourself some grace when it's sensitive issues. And if I could add one more P, just for the fun of the alliteration, that's what pastors do. Try to shape the whole thing in positivity. Try to be as positive you can for them and with them, even if it hurts, even if it makes you sad. And then try to reshape at the end and be positive with yourself as well. Even giving yourself a little praise. I can't help it now. I'm on a complete P roll. Right? Say, give yourself a little praise at the end. Just say, you know what? I covered that all right. That was hard. I'm a little sad, but give yourself a little feedback, a little positive praise feedback. And
I like it. I have no more P's, so I'm gonna leave it there. We're gonna leave it there. But per se, but that kind of just right. Okay, another question. Reconnecting with high school friends over the holidays, and they insist on bringing their kids. I miss my friends, and I want to spend time with just them so we can really catch up. I'm the only kid-free person in the group, and I feel like I almost get eye rolls when I mention adult time. I'm now starting to feel resentful and want to decline invites to kid-friendly gatherings to just prove a point.
Yeah.
Which I don't blame her.
No, not at all.
She says it's not good and it's not healthy. Any advice here would be helpful.
Yeah, and you and I have both been in this scenario many times.
Yeah.
You as a single woman, also us as married without kids. And those dynamics change quite a bit. And I totally understand her point. I think she's saying more out of frustration than desire. Like, I feel like not going at all if I just have to be part of the giant kid fest. And we know, Karin, that the research about these rites of passage and these developmental movements and progressions do matter. So the relationship, those who are single and then all of a sudden all their friends are married, that makes it different. Then you're all married and then somebody has a bunch of kids or a bunch of people with kids, some don't, makes a difference. Then you get divorced and your other friends don't, that makes it right. All those things matter. But I think it's coming down to the foundational roots of the relationship. What do you need? What do you want? And then if you need to be, even though this is hard, to ask for ahead of time or even set it up even getting babysitters if need be, right? To help. Hey, my best friend or my husband, if you're married or whatever, is willing to watch all the kids so us ladies can all go to Panera together and at least get an hour and a half, get something to orchestrate it and try to set it up and declare to your friends, hey, this is really important. I love your guys' kids. I'm so happy I miss you guys as you.
Yeah.
Being very specific, very direct, opening those needs up. Now that's vulnerable because some of the ladies might come back and say, I just can't. My baby has separation anxiety right now, or she's feeding off schedule and like every 20 minutes or every half hour. I met with a woman yesterday whose baby is not feeding in any kind of normal structure at all. And even though she's tried, and that's hard, right? That changes everything. So that's just a basic, immediate response to some of the framework that might help. What comes to mind for you?
Yeah, well, I'm concerned because she already has tried a little bit of that and she gets the eye rolling. So,
but that sounds like she's saying it in the moment.
Well, let's see what
like maybe she's saying it when they're already all together.
Oh,
I'm saying to try to do it ahead of time or structured or.
I'm the only kid-free person in the group, and I feel like I almost get eye rolls when I mention adult time.
So I guess it's hard to say.
Yeah, it's hard to say if she's mentioning it beforehand or during.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is, gosh. I mean, part of me thinks if these kids are little, like you said, there's just a lot more hands-on parenting. Then some people are not comfortable leaving their kids with a lot of babysitters and
barely
things.
Anybody.
We've had that situation where wanted to do some things and people are like, nope, not going to leave my kid with a sitter. So I guess there might be a season of this friendship. I mean, I know when we're in a different season ourselves, we do have to find friends who are in that same season.
Yeah.
Because these parents may not be prepared. And I think it's actually too bad because we all know also that moms do benefit if they get a little break from the kiddos. Yeah. So I think
and the marriage is benefited as well when everybody gets away from the kids for a little bit as much as their joy.
The marriage is
it's one of our topics for the theme of 2025 is talking more about that kind of stuff. So
the hierarchy in the home needs to be the marriage, not the parenting subsystem. So this is something, it's universal.
But you're saying a really good important point for our listener to hear. So we suggested some possible strategic ways, again, to do it ahead of time, well in advance, and even trying to help orchestrate or set up if possible.
Yeah, and
especially if you're kind of a leader in the group.
Yourself and
exactly. Yeah. But if not, and if the girls, the women, or the guys, whoever it is in this particular case, are not comfortable with that, you might want to stay engaged with that group under their conditions, so you still have those friendships, but also look for some more ladies now that are maybe in a similar scenario or more guys that are in a similar scenario.
Yeah.
To try to get a little bit of both, a little bit of that connection. Those are hard resignations, right? Without being defeated or without giving up, just to resign yourself to go, okay, what I need from this group is a little limited right now and might even be missing for a while. Are these friendships like longevity ones that I really, really want to keep? They're really important to me that I'm going to fight through a little bit. Are they relatively new and not that beneficial or needed? I do that bullseye assessment, Karin, with my interpersonal class where you have to put 4 rings. What do they call those?
Concentric circles.
Concentric circles. Yeah, I couldn't pull that name out. And you put your friends and your family, who's closest to you, who's afar, which ones are moving towards you, which ones are moving away, which ones do you want to address in some capacity, which ones you don't. It's just helping students look at their friendship group, look at their family group, look at who really speaks into you, helps you become the person you want to be, who maybe is accidentally or incidentally or intentionally not. And maybe for this woman who wrote in, or the man who I didn't know which gender it was, to look at her own circles and see where this particular group of friends are. If they're really in that inner core, like really close to you are, then I think it's worth fighting for. If they're not, and it's not doing a whole lot for you at the moment other than frustrating you, don't kick them out of the circles, but maybe they go to a different circle for a little bit and you look for and pray for and find some other friends or reach out to maybe another longevity friend from high school that you haven't talked to in 10 years, see what they're doing. And just not being an advocate for your own change, your own movements, not feeling like you have to react to everything and then you're stuck. You have no choice.
And recognizing that there are seasons of friendship, the way we have seasons of the year. And there may be when we've got the infants and the toddlers, that might be a time when you, like you said, are reaching out to make some new friendships. It doesn't mean you're disloyal. It doesn't mean that you won't circle back in another season when they have a little more flexibility in time. Their focus is on their babies right now. And we know, again, getting back to what we talked about in the last question, we know down deep that that's exactly what mamas should be doing. Now, we also said they should be getting some independent time with their friends and with their husband, most importantly, to make sure that marriage stays strong. However, it's also important that they have a huge amount of their time and focus on their children.
Yes.
We know that intellectually it can still hurt. It can still feel like our friends have abandoned us. It can still feel like that we don't matter as much in their world. We don't mean as much to them. So we have to kind of look at that, like you said earlier with the other question, we have to look at that honestly, recognize how that feels. And then again, I think our P's are going to come into play here again to prepare for what this might mean. It may mean that for the next couple years, it could be, depending on if they're little infants and going to toddlerhood, it's not going to let up for quite a while, depending on how many kiddos they have. It may be that for the next couple of years, they're not going to be your primary go-to. They're going to move into another part of your concentric circle, like you said.
And it sounds like she's tried, and I would encourage her to try again at least once. I call it in the marital dynamic instant need clarification, to communicate and clarify what your needs are and why. Man, I love you guys are all awesome mothers, but I so much miss just us, the women time. Is it possible for even a half hour sometime this Christmas break? Can we, can I pick you guys all up and take you somewhere quick just to bless on you guys and love you, because I need us as us too? Then I'm glad to come over and play with the kids, or I'm glad it is, right, if she is. Right, again, not trying to lie, not trying to shift, but because it's my belief as a therapist, especially of trauma and all the other aspects of the crisis work, that if we start to not be honest with our friends and our family, at least in a relatively simple fashion, once we start not being honest, we start getting misaligned and resentful and start isolating or retreating. And then feel like I should just scream at them and write them off. And maybe that ends up being the decision long-term. I hope not. And you and I would not advocate for that, but better to come up honestly, a little bit of disclosure, a little bit of sharing, a little preparation, and see if that can move the needle a little bit. Sometimes it can't, and then you have to make your decisions from there.
Yeah. And it goes back to that vulnerability piece and whether or not someone's prepared to do that. And sometimes
we're in a good place. We can, sometimes we can't.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting as you talk. I think you and you're a little bit more of an upfront communicator than I am. So in that scenario, I think I would maybe be frustrated that I had to be the one that wow, couldn't my friend just recognize that I'm so happy for her and her life and everything she's got and these kids, but that maybe I would like her to be the one to be like, oh yeah, we should still have some adult time.
I understand.
So I think I might just be like, I'm not going to be honest about that. But I'm not saying that's right. I'm just
No, and we're just saying if the sadness is deep and the loss is profound, I would encourage some type of direct movement towards seeing if you could fill that gap, rather than just accept it and feel the profound loss and then just give up.
Because where I go is I'm not going to beg for you to carve out space in your world for me. That's where I go. The pride gets in. I mean, I guess full disclosure, I'm a very prideful person. We've just found out in this episode. But I say all that just because I'm trying to get the fullness of possible where she might be. And I think I have felt that before. But to your point about being willing to give at least a bit of that honesty, not full meltdown mode, because we have to protect our hearts.
Yes.
And especially if we sense that maybe our friend is totally overwhelmed with diapers and bottles, and she does not have the bandwidth to be what we want her to be right now. We have to be grown up about our friendships and what they're capable of.
Yes. And
not expect something from someone who just doesn't have it to give. So, but by giving a little bit of honesty, you can keep the intimacy there. I think if you pull back all the way, and just
channel stays open,
putting up a wall, and then there's the intimacy. And when you try to circle back later in a couple of years, I think it'll be harder to do that.
I agree. Yeah, it's like a wall to get over instead of just a window to look through again.
Oh, look at you. So metaphorical.
Threw that one out, yeah. Oh, I had a nice lunch, so maybe it just came out
goodness. Right. Poetic.
But I think you're right, too, in the seasons of our own heart, seasons of the friendship, seasons of, all of those things are factors. And again, give ourselves some grace. right? Acknowledge we're sad, we're hurt, it's frustrating, right? Like you said, sometimes it's like, hey, I don't want to have to beg for this. I don't want to. And then at times, what I tell wives and husbands all the time in sessions is, hey, if we're going to rebuild this intimacy, we're going to have to get back into the vulnerability of asking, can we please spend some time together and do it like this, right? And because sometimes we get so frustrated and hurt, we just check it out and say, well, he can't change or she can't change or whatever. And maybe for this lady, her friends have seemingly not caught every single hint she's given. She probably gave some really good ones, and they're just missing it.
Right.
And so it's that vulnerability again to risk being hurt again a little bit and try to do it in a way where you kind of orchestrate and plan and structure. Those are hard. Those are great questions. Very, very nuanced, unique. Her situation is different than mine or yours or anybody else's.
And I appreciate the vulnerability of the listeners for offering the questions in the first place and letting us have a moment to talk to the listener directly. Also hoping that these themes are such that other listeners will find some value in hearing our responses.
Yeah, one of my listeners said it helps them to hear us process the questions out loud externally, even if they know we're just going off the top of our heads, because it gives them different angles or perspectives to process themselves.
Yeah.
So we don't want anybody to think, oh, Karin and I have the answers for everything. That's not what we're intending here. But we are very, very experienced in dissecting and analyzing on the fly and communicating it. And we're hoping something resonates and gives them some encouragement, some hope, some possibilities.
All right. Well, let's pray for our folks who are going to be hitting some Christmas parties with some issues that might be tender and sensitive.
Yeah, including you and me.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
I'm in there.
All right, Lord, we thank you for this time to just discuss some questions from the listeners about those nuances and those variables and those vulnerabilities of communication and connection, community, as I'm in my alliteration mode, and the sensitivities involved. And someone asks us stuff that is hard and catches us off guard or maybe puts us in a little bit of a trauma response or an anxious response. And so, Lord, we're asking when we know in advance that we can prepare and kind of talk through and plan it a little bit and even have some set pivot times or some techniques to get the attention and focus back to somebody else so it just doesn't put us in really awkward, challenging positions that can be disappointing or defeating, discouraging, frustrating. And so, Lord, the time when we gather all together as family and friends is sometimes super fun and also profoundly challenging. And so we're asking for your favor, your blessing, your grace. May the processing Karin and I did today be a benefit and encouragement to the listeners who wrote in. And as we move into the Christmas season and do a bunch more podcasts, Lord, about family dynamics and systemics of relationship, that your words, your wisdom would come through us to encourage and bless all of us. And we thank you again for this Christmas season, the birth of your Son, our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
Love and Life with Dr. Karin and Pastor Elliott is produced by Tim May and executive producer, Dr. Karin Anders-Nabel. For more information about Love and Life, please go to loveandlifemedia.com.